else says, nah, I'm okay with the synthetic pre-made. I prepared a lot of this in case we had kids, because there was one mother with 11 kids that she homeschools, and she was going to bring her brood. So we'll go through it a little bit faster, since you probably don't need a lot of the hands-on demonstration. I'm Lynea Weatherly, and this is my life, or was my life. I lived in Pipe Creek in the 1980s, and I lived off-grid for 11 years. And when I had kids, home births, I decided, the nearest medical facilities are like 45 minutes away. I ought to learn how to take care of them. So I discovered that my great-grandmother had a journal, and that she had been into this on my father's side. And I discovered that my name, Lynea, is the female version of Linnaeus, who named all the plants worldwide with 2 Latin names so that everyone could talk about the same plant regardless of their language. So in a way, I kind of grew into my heritage as an herbalist, a master herbalist, and my children never needed a physician, and they were never sick at school, and they never had to miss when they finally went to school. We homeschooled for quite some time. So I put on the presentation that none of my family were harmed in the using of these materials. But of course, always, nowadays, 40 years ago I didn't have to do this, but nowadays we have to have a disclaimer. So the disclaimer is, this information is historical and educational and not intended to prescribe or diagnose. It's not a substitute for professional help, and I am not directly or indirectly dispensing medical advice or information, because I'm not a doctor. So that means I don't have any responsibility if you try this on yourself. It's all your own wisdom, which is how we ought to be anyway. It's all our own wisdom, right? Going back to the heart center, our own knowledge, our own experience. So everything I'm going to share with you today is from personal experience. I've backed it up on the presentation for you with reliable sources that you can check out, so you can get more information from .gov or .pub.gov, etc., or herbalists that I know their reputation and what they've done and used, etc. So that's how we're going to go today. And let's see, will you go with my fingers up? Oh, really? Okay, let's see. So this is a semi-game. We really don't have to do it as I would have done it if we had our little kids present. But this is a guessing game. This is the garden first aid guessing game. So these are the things, 1 through 12 issues, that we might all need first aid for at any point in our existence in this wild hill country that we live in. And these are the items that we're going to use for these 12 possibilities. So the idea was that look at these 1 through 12, and then look at the items from nature and kind of get an idea for yourself. What do you think? What matches up? Which of these things? So here's to staunch bleeding. So which of these things? Cayenne pepper, raw cabbage. In fact, you know what? Well, no, we won't. Cayenne, raw cabbage, the common potato, mullein leaf, mullein flower, yellow onion, garlic, raw honey, ginger root, or clay. So you'd wonder, which one could you use for stopping bleeding? Which one is nature's penicillin? Which one could be used for an earache? What would you use for a cough? And you can use more than one of these, so it's not just limited to one item. How would you make a Band-Aid? What is ancient Egyptian wound repair? How can you soothe aching muscles? What if you have indigestion? How can you reduce inflammation or pain in your body? How could you get rid of a sty in your eye or the pink eye that comes up? What is free toilet paper? And if you have a bee sting, what could you do about it? Okay, so that's where we're going to go. And we're going to start with number 1. So, did anybody know that it was this? Did anybody know that you'd use cayenne for stopping bleeding? Yeah, yeah, awesome. Okay, so it's powder. The powdered cayenne is what people use. and this is how they use it. Let's say you cut your finger, ouch, you're bleeding, wipe off the blood, right on here. The reports are, it doesn't sting. Cayenne is a styptic, which means it helps stop bleeding, or it helps wound repair. But it also has something else in it. It has a compound that goes straight to the brain and says, there's ouch, ouch, ouch here, could you stop the ouch? And so even if it did sting, it won't sting long, because the brain will read the message from the cayenne and numb the area. So I have a love-hate affair with peppers. I love that they work medicinally, and I cannot eat their spiciness. So, I live in Texas of all places. But this, I've seen people use this and work. I've used it with my children. I know that my mentor told us a story of a friend of hers who was in a car accident and was hemorrhaging internally. How they knew to carry powdered cayenne with me, I didn't even think to ask. But cayenne in water, swallowed down. By the time he got to the hospital, the hemorrhaging had stopped. I also have a friend who has used this for when she saw blood in her stool, didn't know where it was coming from, took the cayenne, no more bleeding.
In water. You said
in water, yeah.
If you're going to ingest
If you're going to ingest
okay.
it, yes. Thank you for clarifying that.
But
Yes.
what did you do when the person was hemorrhaging?
They took this and they actually took, let's see, I guess 1 teaspoon of powdered cayenne in a full glass of water. So they took a teaspoon and put it in the water and drank it down. Yeah.
Oh, no.
You can put it right on
pour
your
it in the
finger.
wound?
Well, hemorrhaging internally.
Oh.
It was internal hemorrhaging.
Okay.
So that's what he did, and those were the results when he got to the hospital. It had stopped it. But what, like if you cut your finger, then what, the wound, what we do is sprinkle the cayenne on.
But
So,
how deep of a wound can you go with that cayenne?
I'm not really a doctor, and I haven't gone that far, so I've never been around a wound that's been cut to the bone, or, that needed like tons and tons of stitches. But if it were my child, and I had to get somewhere fast, I'd not only be applying pressure, I'd be shaking this on there, because they're gonna clean it out anyway when they get there.
And it works great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
That
Thank
situation
you.
with that.
Evidential. Okay, so that's our cayenne. I have listed on here, but I'm not going to go over these with you today because I believe this will be available.
Oh,
if anybody wants
if you'll send it to me,
them, so you don't have to take notes or anything.
Yeah, just
But,
email it to me and I'll post it.
Yeah. I've listed the herbal properties, and at some point, we're planning to give herb classes so that you can really go deep into herbs and learn their properties and what all they're good for, because each of these things, they're good for multiple issues. And I'm just focusing on one right now that might get people's attention and they might need on a daily basis or sometime in their life. And then again, the reliable resources. So let's go to the second one. All right, so how many of you knew that nature's penicillin was garlic? All right, so we have lots of it here. And I was going to do the demonstration of how I take it because I haven't had mine yet this morning, but you all know how to take it when I describe it. So the kids, I was going to show them. So we'll just keep the room from smelling like garlic for the moment. Before antibiotics were discovered, garlic was the main antiseptic used for treating wounds. And it was used specifically in World War I because there wasn't anything else. And by the time penicillin had been discovered, in World War II, it was still used heavily by the Russians and their troops. And so it also has the name of Russian penicillin. In 1913 to 1918, it was used against cholera, typhoid fever, diphtheria, and influenza. Raw garlic, that's where the main ingredient is. It's called allicin, A-L-L-I-C-I-N. That's the main ingredient. Onion has it also, but not quite as strong. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the actually world famous now, internationally famous guru out of India. His name is Sadhguru. And his information about garlic and onion, much to the dismay of his native population in India who use it constantly is that it shouldn't be used constantly because it is a medicine. And so you know how the body will acclimate to anything if it's used over and over and over, it'll quit paying attention to what that could be used for medicinally. So in our family, when we had an earache, we would, and I'm assuming you all know how to do this, you all know how to get a clove of garlic off of garlic, right? So we take a clove of garlic off, and then you put it under the knife blade, big fat knife blade, and you smash it. And the reason you do that is not just to get the skin off easily, it's because that activates the allicin, because you need that juice. That's where the, what they call the medicinal compound is. And of course, there are documentations for this down here in the reliable resources. So what we would do with this clove of garlic is we would slice it. You peel it first, you slice it, and just slip it in the ear canal. What happens is our skin is an amazing sponge. So when you slip it in, it just goes in and spreads. It is antibacterial, it is antiviral, it is nature's penicillin. So just be sure that you don't sleep on it, because you don't want to get it in the ear canal and not be able to get it out of the ear canal. So always leave enough there, so don't shove it all the way in. So that's what we used garlic for. So many uses. I personally take it when I've been exposed to something, or if I have a sore throat or earaches, I chop 2 to 3 cloves up, tiny little pieces. They've been smashed, of course. I don't you're learning a lot about my eating preferences. I don't like the taste of garlic, and so I can't just chew the clove, and I can't put it raw in my salads and eat it. So I chop it all up, put it in a teaspoon, heaping teaspoon, take a drink of water, shovel it in, and swallow it down. And it doesn't burn my throat, I don't have to taste it, I don't have to chew it. So that's the wimp's way of taking garlic.
I was also told that if you let it sit up for like 10 to 15 minutes, it will
Continue
it needs
to
that
improve.
time to air and get everything exposed to the oxygen, and that helps keep it stronger if you're going to use it for medicine purposes.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I wasn't ever trained in the.
But I think that's a newer thing.
Yeah, well, they do have black gold on the market now, and that's aged garlic that's also been cooked like almost to smushiness, cooked and aged, and it's black, and it's getting a big following in the medicinal, the holistic medicinal community, for being more powerful even than the fresh garlic. But I usually stick with what works. If they can prove to me something's better, I'll switch. But I know this works, 40 years of it, and I know it works. All right, our next one is mullein. So you can use mullein or onion for an earache. So this is more that we have on our table for an earache. Now I'm assuming that all of you know mullein or might know mullein. If not, you can pass these around. This is dry. You can open it up and feel it. It is common here in Texas. It's common in many places in the United States. You can find it in creek beds. You can find it in pastures. It grows. You can go out there and look for it even now. Right now, it's a biennial plant. So every year, it's not going to put its stalk up that has the flowers on it, which we'll also talk about. If you see it in the fields now, one of its nicknames is candlestick, because usually this stalk by now with no water and the heat will be brown, be a big long brown stalk. And I don't know any other weed right now out there that you could confuse this with, because the stalk is very identifiable. And this is what it looks like right here when it's not brown and it's healthy, and it puts out these little flowers. And these flowers are what we used for earache oil. So I would go out in the mornings and I would harvest these little flowers, and the whole stalk is not in flower, it's just a few as it goes up the stalk. So you'd pick from lots of different stalks. I'd put them in a glass jar, cover them with olive oil, virgin olive oil, not cooked olive oil, raw olive oil, so that there was no air that could get to the flowers, because you don't want them to mold. And And then every day I would continue to add until I had as many as I wanted, which was usually a jar full, about this size, by about that big around. And it would be filled with olive oil. And I would let that sit for 2 weeks, and then I would strain it through cheesecloth, so that all the particles, the pollen, the pieces stay in the cheesecloth. So you don't want to wring the cheesecloth out, because you're not trying to get all of that. You want sediment to stay in the cheesecloth. And then you have this beautiful golden oil that mullein has nervine properties. So this is what we would sometimes put in the ear to stop the ouch of the earache. I personally love something better. You can look this up on your own if you like. This is my little segue from what's on here. I make lobelia tincture, and I don't have the Latin names for you right now, but you can look up the medicinal Latin name for lobelia. And it comes with cautions. So the cautions are the quantity that you use, because this is an antispasmodic, lobelia is an antispasmodic, and it's a nervine also, like mullein is, but it's also an antispasmodic, so it calms the nerves. So I use this, my son had allergies to all the cedar, that was around us, so he'd cough and cough and cough at night. So I would make the tincture, and that's a process all in its own, which when we do the herb classes, I'll teach you how to do that. And straining it. If you use the size of a quarter in the palm of your hand, that's too much, because it's also an emetic, so it can cause you to throw up. If you use the size of a dime to the size of a nickel, that's usually the right amount, depending upon the size of the body that you're working with. So, for my son, who was young, it was never more than a dime. Because if you use too much between the dime size, if you don't use the right amount, we'll just put it like that. If you don't use the right amount, it becomes an alert thing, and so it's a stimulant. So it's a very tricky herb. It requires some expertise. I hadn't planned on sharing it today, but since it's you guys, I did.
Or tea.
Yes, yes.
Much easier less likely to go over, I think.
Yeah, but actually, the tea, if you have any kind of allergies or sensitivities to out there, will cause itching in the throat. And so it can cause swelling in there too. So I avoid taking lobelia personally, internally, because of that experience and because of others that I know. So you're probably one of the ones with your good Minnesotan blood that's immune to it. Yeah. All right, so, any questions about the mullein?
Are you taking it by mouth, or are you putting it in the ear?
In the ear.
Okay.
It's an ear oil, so it's made from the flowers. Yeah.
Do you warm the oil before you put it in the ear? Because I remember my grandmother warming the oil for my ear.
Yeah, it's like having a baby. I like things to be tepid.
Yeah.
So just, if you can put it on your wrist and you can't really tell whether it's hot or cold. And I always had it not in a refrigerator, because again, I was off grid, so I didn't chill it, so it was room temperature.
And then you drop it in.
And drop it in the ear, and then I put in the little cotton ball so that no air can get in there. Yeah, that's what we did. They're strong, strapping guys now, still alive. Yeah.
Does lobelia grow locally around us?
Not well, no, not here. It's not. You can make it grow, but again, you're making it grow. Okay, so onion. Onion is pretty much like garlic in terms of its properties of pain and reducing bacteria. So this is documented nowadays on how what's in onion can, hey, check that out. Whoa, look at there.
Now you're cooking.
That was a good
Yes.
mistake. What's in onion can be used for the earache. So what I do is I slice either a red onion or a yellow onion. They tend to have more of the properties that we're looking for than a white onion does. And I do slightly warm it. I don't want to cook it, so I don't want to cook away the properties, but I also don't want to put a cold onion up to a painful ear. So I just slightly warm it, and I slice it. Some people grate it, you get more of the juice. It's a little messier. I like to just take the sliced onion that I've warmed in the pan, hold it up to my ear, and sometimes I just hold it. Sometimes I'll find a way to bandage it there, or I'll just lay on it like this, and it's just, it's so comforting. There's something so comforting about onion on the ear. Okay, any questions on this one? Whoops. You know, you don't have to like take up the whole screen. Okay, let's try that. Okay, the next one. We're still dealing with onion, and we're still dealing with mullein, only this time we're adding in honey. And of course, you want to use Bandera honey, or honey from your own hive. You want raw honey. And one of the ways you know it's raw, I'll pass this around, you can see that it is sugaring. So that means it hasn't been heated. You don't want it to be heated because that kills a lot of the properties in honey. All right, so what did we do for the cough? Well, not all coughs, and this is what I learned with children and studying and the herbal teachings, not all coughs respond to the same remedies. So the kind that my son had the most often was a moist phlegmatic cough, where you're trying to get that mucus out of your lungs. And the lungs were congested, but they couldn't get it all out. So congested because for him, he had a lot of allergies to the cedar and to other things that helped create mucus in the lungs. So I would take this and slice it into slivers, not chop it, but just slice it and then, you know, cut it like this. Or you could cut it like this. Any way you get it cut up where it's not bulky. And then I would lightly warm that in the pan just for the same reason. I don't want to put something cold and shocking on the bottom of his feet, because that's where it would go. And the reason for that is that when you put the raw onion on the bottom, on the soles of your feet, right against the skin, and then use plastic wrap to bind it in place. Make sure they're in bed so they don't have to squish on the onions to get somewhere, or at least they're sitting down. The onion helps draw from the lungs the problem. It helps bring it out of the lungs. It's a drawing power. When you take it off, throw it away, not in your compost. Wrap it up in the plastic, throw it away. Worms don't like onions and garlic, so you don't want to throw onions and garlic in your compost. Also, you don't want to be thrifty and reheat it and use it or anything, because it's pulled out toxins from the body, so it would be toxic to consume. Now, in addition to all of that, I would also make mullein infusion, which is a tea, fancy name for a tea. And the general recipe for making an herbal tea is if it is leaves, which keep their properties for 1 year when they're dry. So if you've had your herbs, you can still tell what they are longer than a year, even if you can tell what they are, pitch them, because they've lost their strength, their power. So 1 teaspoon of dried herb per 1 cup of boiled water. And I say boiled because most people make the mistake when they're making a tea of boiling their water and dumping their herbs in. Instead, you put your herbs in the cup that you're going to be drinking out of, or a container you're going to pour out of, and you pour the boiling water over it. And you use glass. You know, I hope by now you've all thrown plastic out of your kitchen, that you don't drink in plastic, you don't eat on plastic. 40 years ago, there wasn't that much awareness, even though instinctively most of us knew. But now they do have plastic that doesn't leach into what you eat, but you better be really skilled and remember the little triangles and what numbers are on those little recyclable triangles if you're going to use plastic. It can accumulate in the body. It likes to accumulate in the body, as a matter of fact. Okay, so mullein, what we did is I boiled a cup of water for 5 minutes, and made it exactly the way I told you. Put the mullein, the ground mullein, as you see, that crumbly plant. Poured the water over it, put a lid on it. That's called steeping. I let it stay in the water for 3 minutes, up to 5 minutes. Usually 3 minutes is the right amount of time, but if you're gonna get really educational about it at some point and professional, it's learning the extraction point of each herb. So how long do you do that? So it's the leaves that you pour the boiling water over. When they're roots, you actually simmer them. So you don't pour the boiling water over roots. So that's just for the dried herbs. All right, so this is anti-inflammatory, antibacterial. What is? Well, honey. So the honey that we passed around, well, I'll tell you a little later how come that is your ancient Egyptian wound repair when we get to that page. Okay, if you do not have mullein in your garden, you can grow it. It does grow out here. Like sandy soil, like dry conditions, you do not have to baby mullein. And it's just so useful. Okay, so now we're gonna go to a cough syrup. So, how many of you put together onion and honey in your mind for cough syrup? For coughing? Nope, okay. It's probably because it doesn't taste so great. It's kind of yummy, but it works. So, I often say that the reason my kids' cough went away is because it tasted so bad they didn't want any more cough syrup from mom. But the way that I made it is I grated the onion onto a plate and then or into a bowl, not with the skin on, with the skin off. And then wherever our honey jar is, there it is, I would pour the honey over the onion. So you pour it over the onion until the onion's covered. Okay, so you wait about 4 hours, and then you'll see that the honey has extracted the moisture from the onion, because that's what honey does. Honey has no water in it, and so it pulls moisture. So it pulls moisture from the onion, and you get this honey-colored, liquidy, onion-tasting syrup that's sweet. And it works. So that is your homemade onion honey cough syrup. Here's a reliable source. They've discovered it actually works. All right, here's one everybody wanted to find out about. What was the onion? Did anybody think the onion was the Band-Aid? Guess what? Not one of the kids that I taught for 20 years at San Antonio Military Academy, I would do their colonial fair, and we would do this onion Band-Aid for how the colonists had Band-Aids, and not one of them ever picked it out either. Here's what you do. Right. You cut a slice out of the onion, okay? And then any one of these will have the Band-Aid in it, because next to the onion is a membrane. So this is a very thin one. I would cut a thicker one if I needed it, but for fingers, it's a fantastic Band-Aid. So, can I borrow a finger? So what you do is, just like this, and it sticks. There you go. That's the onion Band-Aid. Now, if you want to get
Does
more
it smell?
medicinal,
Smells good.
then you could put a little bit of honey on it, okay? Because again, honey has no moisture, no water, so it draws out water. What does bacteria have to survive? Moisture.
It doesn't slide
So
around.
you can put the
Feels like it would, but it's.
honey
It
on
doesn't, yeah. Oh, I just unhooked it.
there.
So do you put the honey on it before you put the Band-Aid on?
You can. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, the Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Of
stupid
course.
question.
Yes, you do. The honey would go on first, and then you can wrap the Band-Aid, so the
Okay.
honey can help hold it on too.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
again, you can make bigger, it depends upon how wide you cut your onion. So every one of these little slices that comes from your onion, every one of them has
Another Band-Aid.
another Band-Aid. Come on, you.
I'm assuming that you want to stop the bleeding first, right? If it's a bad, if it's bleeding.
You know,
Yeah.
I didn't really
Use
use
the-
these for, yeah, cayenne. I didn't really use these for like major wounds. I used
Right.
something else, but,
No,
alright, you wanted an onion Band-Aid?
See, I cut myself in the kitchen today, like a dummy.
I keep falling.
Now, when it's done, all it can do for you, it'll
It's
fall
like,
off.
I'm not allowed to play with knives anymore.
Thank you.
All right, they are antibacterial, just like HEB land. All right, so here we have honey as an ancient Egyptian wound repair. Raw honey, and this is from Smithsonian Magazine. Raw honey has been used for centuries as a medicinal remedy. Because it's so thick, it rejects any kind of viral or bacterial growth. It also contains hydrogen peroxide, creating the perfect barrier against infection for wounds. The earliest recorded use of honey for medicinal purposes comes from Sumerian clay tablets, which state that honey was used in 30% of prescriptions. The ancient Egyptians used medicinal honey regularly, making ointments to treat skin and eye diseases. Honey is also naturally extremely acidic. It has a pH that falls approximately in the range of 3 to 4.5. That's very acidic. Nothing can grow in it. That's the point of knowing that it's acidic. What's more, when honey isn't sealed in a jar, it sucks in moisture. While it's drawing water out of the wound to keep it from getting infected, it's letting off a very minute amount of hydrogen peroxide. It's so minute that it actually promotes healing. This is from the Smithsonian. Honey for healing open gashes is no longer just folk medicine. In the past decade, Derma Sciences, a medical device company, has been marketing and selling Medi-Honey, bandages covered in honey, that are used in hospitals around the world. So, Egyptians knew it first. Now, ginger for soothing aching muscles. This is the best thing to have on hand in the winter months especially. When you don't have enough heat, you just grate this up, or if you have the flu, or you feel achy, or you've been working out and your muscles are sore, you take the ginger and you grate it. Now, if I was going to do this for me in a bathtub, I would grate this entire stalk right here. I would grate that whole thing.
Skin and all?
Skin and all. Grate it up. I would put it in a pan of water, whatever size pan you've got, because you're going to pour it into your bathtub, so it doesn't matter how much or how little you use. You put it in that pot, and then you boil it for about 20 minutes. Now I say boil it, you bring it to a boil, and then you simmer. Turn it down to a simmer. And it will turn the water a golden yellow. And you'll smell it, the aroma just fills your kitchen. Then you take that to your bathtub and you pour it into your bathtub and you get in and you soak for about 20 minutes or so, and it turns your skin pink because the circulation gets going and it keeps moving all the sludge. And when we lived off-grid, we acclimated to the weather. So when winter time came, sometimes you just wanted some extra heat and you made a ginger bath or you drank the ginger tea. Just wonderful. Let's see here. I use cotton cloths if I want to apply it to a specific body part. So say I've been out, you know, chopping trees or hauling rocks, whatever. I am a rock hauler. And my shoulders or muscles are aching. I do the same thing, and I like my ginger strong, so I'd probably take half of this root right here and cook it exactly the way I told you. Bring it to a boil, then put a lid on, simmer it for 20 minutes, leave it until it's yellow. You want it yellow. You want not light yellow, but a golden yellow. Then what you're going to do is you're going to add enough water to it. You can strain it, or you can, if you're lazy like I am sometimes, you can just leave all the pieces in the pot. It doesn't really matter. Add enough water so that it's not too hot to get on your skin. Then you dip a cloth, not a colored one, preferably a white one. You could use an old t-shirt, you could use a handkerchief, something that's cotton. You dip it in, and then you bind or just set it on that area. Now if you're gonna leave it for just a while, you'll take your handy plastic wrap. It's about the only thing I like plastic for is this, and it holds in the moisture, holds in the heat. So it's like a heating pad in a way, only it's got those wonderful properties that we've learned of about ginger. The redness represents the increased circulation, which helps carry lactic acid and other toxins that make your muscles sore. It helps carry them out of your muscles. And you'll never want to reuse a cloth that you've used as a compress. That's what it's called when you dip the cloth into your tea and you put it on yourself. That's called a compress. You'll never want to use it again until you've laundered it, because it will be having the toxins in it. And then, because ginger doesn't really seem to affect the worms, I do throw the cooked ginger into my compost pile. Okay, so that's the ginger bath soak. And these are the herbal properties of ginger. I just love this. This is the most incredible gift to us. It's an alternative, which means it helps purify the blood. It's a stimulant, which means it increases the energy of the body and its functionality. It's a stomachic, which means it improves digestion. So I brought some today for anybody who wants to have some. What it does is improving digestion. We'll get to that later on, but I'll reinforce it. It has a way of pushing out of the stomach what's still sitting in there that could ferment and cause you digestive disabilities. Because that pushes it down into the intestinal tract where it gets on its way and starts moving like it should. And that's also a tonic. So as a tonic, ginger strengthens and energizes the body. So this is something that an after meal drink with ginger, right on target for the stomach. A tonic anytime that you need to pick me up or need a little extra energy, a ginger tea, hot, cold, or as I have done here, put in lemonade. Now, I had planned to make this for you from scratch, but I went to Costco and they didn't have any lemons. So instead, I bought a lemonade, and I don't know if is there anybody who wouldn't like to taste lemonade with ginger in it? Okay, then I'm going to have these here. Maybe I'll have you pass them around?
You bet. I'll pour them too.
You want?
Huh? Oh, yeah, that would be great, sure. Here you go.
Does that help with leaky gut?
If I were to answer that question, especially while I'm being recorded, I could be
I didn't hear the
in
question.
trouble. I didn't
Does it
either.
help with
Maybe
leaky
you could
gut?
ask
Does
me
it help with leaky?
when my hearing aids are turned on. I don't know
Does it
about
help with
hearing
leaky
aids.
gut?
We can visit.
She's not a doctor, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure too, so, but I don't know how to recommend you to information.
I'll share a recipe. In the summertime, I seed mango and ginger, but I grate the skin off. I
Mhm.
cut it off, and I cut the ginger in little slivers, and I put it in the bottle, and I fill it up with filtered water, and it's so delicious.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, you feel so great.
Yeah.
Drinking that in the mango. I
Your
eat frozen
tonic.
mango.
And your alternative, yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's go to the next next one, here's ginger again. We were just talking about all this, so, for indigestion. I've known about it for so long, I tend to think everyone else probably knows about it as well. But UCLA Health tells us that chronic indigestion's often the result of the stomach taking too long to empty its contents. And ginger speeds up that process by helping food move more quickly through the gastrointestinal tract. Several studies found that taking ginger speeds up gastric emptying, even when participants did not have chronic indigestion. So that is what a tonic does. And what is in the ginger that makes it do its ginger thing is gingerol. So that's what encourages the efficient digestion. Now, dried ginger works, powdered ginger works, but fresh has more of the gingerol in it than does dried or powdered. And powdered is the least efficient way to store an herb. So if you're growing your own herbs, or you're growing things that you're keeping that you want for later, you're drying them out, it's better, like y'all saw our herbs, that the mullein that got passed around, save it in chunks. Don't get all efficient and look like the grocery store dead powdered things in bottles on the shelves because, oh, well, I've seen it this way, so I should just crush it down to the tiniest molecule possible. It evaporates out, it loses its potency. Okay.
Do you grow your own or buy it?
What?
Ginger.
Oh, I definitely do both. My ginger plant right now, I have 3 of them, and one of them is bigger than my hands can reach to tell you how wide it is, and it's taller than this. And it's on the back porch here in all this heat. I grow it in a self-watering container, and ginger's fun because it just grows tight. It just makes another root, makes another root, makes another root. So you fill up a pot really, really quickly. Doesn't go through the winter time, but if I want magnificent greenery for the summer, I just drag the pots inside. You know, I'll separate the pots, so I'll have 2 of them, and just you can keep going, and the blossoms, when they bloom and you walk outside your door, the air is just filled with that ginger smell. Oh, they're just delightful.
Can you, take the ginger root that's in the grocery store and root it? Or,
Sometimes, you know, the grocery stores and the growers and developers of plants don't really want people not
Right.
paying for
Providing
their
their own.
products, so they irradiate a lot of the food. They radiate the things that come in a big truck, and they radiate everything, so that the idea is to stop their capacity to grow. But I'll tell you, I got a Hawaiian avocado at somewhere, and that thing's growing like crazy. It's sprouted, it's got its leaves going out there. The Hawaiian avocados are the really big ones, big like this, and so it didn't care. It says, you can't get me, and so it's growing fine. And then sometimes if you're fortunate, yeah, you'll be able to grow something straight from the grocery store. I've been able to grow sunchokes. Sunchokes are, really, they grow wild everywhere, and once you see them and learn about them, you'll go, oh, really? I could have been growing these all along? They're tuberous like this. They grow underground, and they look like a common weedy sunflower with long stems and yellow flowers. And they will spread if you have the right kind of soil for them. And I started mine from sunchokes that I got in the grocery store. And they did great.
There's a Mideast store or a medical center in San Antonio that, one of the things they sell is ginger, and it looks way different than the ginger you would find in an H-E-B. You can tell that there's life in there, the little
Yes.
buds are out, and I'll bet that would grow.
Yes, I bet you're right. And another point, I'm glad you mentioned that, because when you store your ginger, you want to store it in plastic in the refrigerator. You don't want it evaporating all of its freshness. If it starts to get wrinkled or starts to look old, it is old. And if you try to squeeze, you know, the juice out of an old ginger, you can take this size right here of old ginger, slice it up, put it in your ginger peeler, squeeze as hard as you could. You're lucky if you'll get 2 drops of juice. The fresh, this amount, you'll get maybe 30 or 35 drops of squeezed ginger juice. So that is the difference between fresh and dried. So keeping it in a baggie, sealed, airtight if you can, in the refrigerator, best way to store it.
Is that one from your plant? that you had on?
No, for the sake of, to get one from my plant, I would have had to go through all the dividing and taking everything on its side and getting the pots out and all that sort of stuff. It was too much for these hot summer days, yeah. I'd love to say this was mine, but I bought this one. Okay, now cabbage. Did you think that cabbage would be used for reducing inflammation? No. Okay, this one I am gonna demonstrate. So, cabbage. Yeah. When my children were young and needing my first aid, I think I mentioned this, I used to joke that they went to bed smelling like a salad. Onion on their feet, garlic in their ear, and cabbage on their lungs. Except their allergies and stuff. So crushed cabbage leaves are one of the most widely used anti-inflammatory remedies in Polish folk medicine. Cabbage has been used in natural medicine mainly for rheumatic pain, for vein and lymphatic vessel inflammation, for bruises, sprains, mastitis, or gastrointestinal problems. Its spectrum of use is much wider than this, however, and it encompasses the treatment of both internal and external diseases. This is a quote, and this is where I got the quote from. So what I did is to use this anti-inflammatory, amazing plant, is you take off a leaf. You can't very easily put that on yourself because it's a wonderful little bowl, great for salads and putting your stuff in, but not so good for putting it on the body. So what you do is you lay it down and you squash it. You take, if you have a rolling pin still, you take the rolling pin. You hear me crushing it? Okay, so I'm releasing the juices that are in it, and I'm turning something circular into something that can lay flat on the body. So now I have this floppy, flat piece of cabbage, and it goes directly on the skin wherever the inflammation is. So for my kids, that used to be the lungs. So the cabbage would go on their lungs like this and be handy wrapped on, plastic all around them.
Little plastic mummies.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
It went to bed wrapped in
Yeah,
plastic.
wrapped in plastic. I didn't leave it on all night, but it's like, anyway, it all worked. They're very healthy, very strong. One's 6'1", the other's 6'4", so big guys, still healthy. Otherwise, if you had, let's say, the joint was hurting, you could easily wrap it around the joint like that. And then you bandage it with your plastic, right? Unless you want to put more of them on there and see if you can somehow link them together. I never did that. When you're done, to the compost bin with this one, no eating it again. It goes straight to the compost bin because it will have pulled out the toxins, the lactic acid that's making things hurt.
But it says right there, not put in the compost or reused.
That would
Because-
be me. Or did I say that? Oh, that's me. That's when I wrote this up. That's not theirs. That's me.
Oh, okay.
And
So you can't,
sometimes
so
I
you
do
can't,
compost this one, yeah. So,
okay.
yeah, they will have toxins in them, but you know what? It's not enough to kill the microorganisms in your compost.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that would have been me working late at night. This was the last slide after many days of doing slides. I say use your own wisdom. Put it where you want it, just don't eat it. Alright, so now we're gonna take care of a sty in your eye.
No way.
Anybody figure out it was potato?
Should've known.
It's potato. And potato, so here we go, let's read my story here. As a young mother, when I first heard that raw non-peeled potato placed over a sty-infected eyelid would help it go away. Of course, I was curious to figure out if that was true. I didn't have any pink eyes or styes to work on, so guess what happened to me that week?
Go.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for. So I did. So, not knowing the best way to accomplish raw potato on my eyelid, I grated it, and then I just grabbed a handful, plopped it on my eye, closed my eye, and laid down. I went to sleep, and of course, when I woke up, potato was all over the pillow. But guess what? It was gone. It was gone. Now, since then, there's better ways, of course, to do that. You can take a very thin slice, and this is the one I prefer to do now. Take a thin slice like this. Thin. Okay, see how thin? And then you just mold it to your eye, like an eye patch. And then, this is what I invented. I take this, okay, put it over my head like a pirate, and then that's over one eye so I can see out of the other eye. And then I take my sleep mask and put that over it and hold the whole thing in place when I'm ready to sleep. Oh, check this out, a new art form. Here is my mascara. You no longer need to go buy ways to take off your mascara. Just slice a potato. Who knew?
So did you have less puffy eyes too? You could use it for a depuffer?
Yeah, like
just
a cucumber.
Yeah.
Just like cucumber, yes. So the properties for a potato, they are antibacterial, which means they help prevent the growth of bacteria, and they're an antioxidant, which means they can remove potentially damaging oxidizing agents in living organisms. And believe it or not, there is an eye doctor who recommends this. There is
That is hard to believe.
right. And there is this article right here that talks about the antibacterial and antioxidant properties of potato.
Oh,
Research
yeah,
papers.
Oh, that's what I was.
Pardon?
What kind of potatoes?
I use this kind, which is this yellow-white potato, but I don't know
I mean, like a red
anything
potato.
about whether a red potato is different or
Russet.
a black potato, Peruvian potatoes. I don't know. We always just grab whatever potato we had. I know I've used russet, and I know I've used this thin skin kind. Good question. If you find out, let me know. Okay. Now, what's our free toilet paper? Can anyone figure that out? Yeah. Well, courtesy of Brenda, who went out to her garden for me and harvested a small toilet paper leaf. This is the mullein. See how flexible it is? And you'll be able to feel how soft it is. Yeah, so you're of course not using the hot, like Sherman, you're not using that crunchy stuff that we passed around earlier when it's dry. This is many names. Cowboys toilet paper. It's called Gypsy Rouge. They used to rub it on their cheeks to make them pink, which then makes me wonder how could you do that and get this pink and it still be safe for toilet paper, but maybe it's just because it was, I don't know, doesn't make sense to me. Well, we have used this, we've never had any problems with it. It's very gentle, just be sure it doesn't have grit and grime on it because the big leaves, it's a rosette and they grow close to the ground, so you'd pick something in the middle of it if you were going to use that. Now, the dried leaves were smoked by Native Americans, and my son had lung problems, so I taught him at an early age how to smoke mullein, which is, you have it crumbled like that, and you have it on a platter, and so
Sherman?
you have smoke coming up, and you just inhale it like that, no wrapping it in the toxic papers and stuff, so that when he was first offered a drag of a cigarette later on in life by an older stepbrother, he gagged on it and he declared, mullein is better. So he never became a cigarette smoker. And I attribute that to mullein at a young age. While dried leaves are best for smoking, it's the soft, fresh leaf that's used by backpackers across the country as nature's emergency roadside toilet paper. It's seldom grown in gardens these days. It's easily found near creek bottoms, in pastures or disturbed soils and ditches. And with any sharing of here's what I've used, let there be caution, because some with tender skin may react in ways that we don't know about or that you don't know about, so just be aware. Here's some of its nicknames, which kind of tell you a lot about it. Cowboy toilet paper, flannel leaf, velvet dock, big taper because of its big stalks that look like a candle, especially with their yellow flowers when they're in bloom and sun shining on them. Miner's candle, poor man's blanket, bunny's ears, and Quaker's rouge. And again, reliable sources for you. Now, what are you going to do for a bee sting? We all know about baking powder, because baking powder as a paste with water is a pH that neutralizes the acid from the venom and helps pull it out. But this is my go-to. This is what I've always used, and oh my goodness, it's the one item I wouldn't be without in my Nature's Pharmacy. It's French green clay, although you can use mud, you can use soil, you can use white clay, you can use bentonite clay, anything that draws as it dries. I was once stealth attacked by a red wasp. I know it's not a bee, okay, but I was on my back porch and I was entering my house and I felt like a bomb had exploded on my back. I screamed, I dropped to the floor, I rolled all over, ripped my clothes off, started screaming for my husband, and told him to get busy and make up some clay because I am allergic to wasp bites and wasp stings, but I don't have any medicine or anything that I take for them. So he made a large amount of clay and smothered it all over my back, and I laid there doing my internal, let's calm down, let's clear this out, the internal part. You gotta get out of panic mode. So drying clay has an incredible pulling power, and it just helps take the redness out. I mean, it was spreading like one sting on me. It was a lot of red, and he had to do a very thick paste of the clay. But I didn't need to do the baking soda. I didn't need to add anything else. I did take some internal tablets that I use for detoxing to help the body internally, my bloodstream, etc. So I just want to say this isn't a substitute for medicines that are needed to counteract allergic reactions to bee stings, but it is a way that helps the body pull out toxins in a relatively rapid manner. Now he had to wipe it off my back as soon as it dried and put on another layer, because that's what you do with clay. So if you need to see clay, I think you all know what clay looks like, but if you need to see it,
Where do you get the French green clay?
I order it online, and I believe, let me think who I ordered it from. I ordered it from an herb company, Mountain Rose. Mountain Rose, yeah, I order it from them. So that's always in my cupboard, and usually if we go anywhere, it's in a backpack or it's wherever that we need it. Okay, so I believe that's the end. So there I am. Oh my goodness, yay me! Lived off the grid in Pipe Creek. I've been an herbalist for all of my life, ever since I discovered it when I became a mom. And I'm so happy to have had this opportunity to share this information with you. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Really good. Okay, so we will take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and do business meeting. Is that okay?